small intestine, where there's all sorts of bugs, you know, looking at dinner coming down the tube, who start digesting it themselves, and they give you gas, and they give you diarrhea. It's very unpleasant for people who are not milk tolerant. None of these people are milk tolerant, so what she's doing is getting rid of the milk sugar by fermenting it away. As far as we can reconstruct, about 6,000 years ago, there was a kid somewhere in Eastern Europe who had a mutation. And this mutation was in the regulatory region that turns lactase production off. So he was like, you know, a baby for his whole life. He was able to digest milk sugar. One can imagine what happened is he was given milk as a baby. If there were cattle there, these were pastoralists, one presumes. And unlike other kids, he got to be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and he kept drinking milk. The result is that he got 40% more calories than any other kid, because 40% of the calories in fresh milk are milk sugar. And those Herrero have to turn that milk into buttermilk or unbelievably awful stuff they drink, because when they milk a cow, they get something that's about 80% milk and about 20% calf slobber. And so when you milk, a vital tool is a stick, and you're milking like this, and you reach around and drive the calf off with the other. Horrible stuff. Tastes awful. But, and this is what most people in the world do. They have to, who don't have this mutation, they have to turn it into cheese or yogurt or something. Get rid of that milk sugar, otherwise they get tummy rumbles. But this kid could keep on drinking milk. Now, we have too many calories, but before 1800, almost everyone in the world was rather Malthusian. There wasn't enough food. And so if you've got a kid that is getting 40% more calories out of the same food, he's going to live while his siblings die if there is a famine or food shortage. As far as we can reconstruct, the selective advantage of this was about 5%. Trying to date the origin of this mutation by looking at the DNA suggests it's about 6,000 years old. We, I mean somebody else, not me, but have actually looked at the DNA sequences from a number of 8,000-year-old skeletons in Denmark. The gene wasn't there. Today in Denmark, everybody's got it. It's almost fixed. 8,000 years ago, it wasn't there. 4,000 years ago, it was at about half the levels we see in Europe today. So this thing, in Denmark, for example, the frequency of the gene is like 98%. 98% of the genes at that locus in Denmark are all descended from this one kid 6,000 years ago. Everybody is descended from it. And everybody can drink fresh milk. Well, it seems that this big advantage had pretty profound consequences for population growth. This colored area here is the extent of so-called Indo-European languages. They're all related. They all seem to have originated, as far as we can tell, 3,000 years ago or so. And these people carrying this single mutation are all the way from Ireland to northern India to northwestern China. A few thousand years. I mean, this is historical time. The easternmost extension of Indo-European was in the Tarim Basin in northwestern China. They're called Tocharians. And this is a picture of a couple of Tocharian monks. Now, this is very interesting because this guy looks about like what you might expect in northwestern China. And this one looks like he walked out of an Irish bar. Right? I mean, this is what you get when you take a group and they expand that fast. The descendants of this guy and this guy's sister today are in the news often. They're called Uyghurs, U-I-G-H-U-R-S, in that area of China. They are quite unpopular with the Chinese government, and a number of them were guests of the United States Army in Guantanamo for a while because they got busted in Afghanistan. And finally the Army came in and said, well, you'll be very relieved to know that we're going to send you all home, we're going to put you on a plane and send you back to China and you're free to go. And they said, oh no, they said, torture us, don't send us back. So they're in the news a lot. And these are the same people who have this mutation of lactose tolerance. So evolution happens in historical time, and this is the last one I'm going to talk about. What we have here is a simulation running and rerunning history. So these are a simulation of a population of 100,000 people, and at this point, a mutation occurs. This boy that can digest milk as an adult appears. This is 100 histories, 100 rooms of history. And in 94 out of 100 histories, this mutation is immediately lost. He had 2 children, but both his children got the old gene from him. The new mutant is immediately lost. This is called genetic drift. Most new mutations are lost. But 6 times out of 100 histories, it persisted and got to be common enough that it would start sweeping, and it takes something like 100, 150 generations to get to high frequencies. This is simply population dynamics because this new mutation raises carrying capacity. But the point I want to make here is, and I'll end with this, that I'm interested in history. I like to read history. We all like to see patterns. We all try to put meaning into historical events. One can do some back-of-the-envelope calculations and calculate that this mutation in this whole population of Central Eastern Europe ought to show up between every 100 and every 1,000 years. Once it shows up, the probability that it persists in this reasonable, plausible case is 6 in 100. So the point is, here's a mutation, a simple chemical change that led to a bunch of sort of cowboy bandits that occupied the whole western half of Eurasia, north of the Semitic languages, they never cracked that Semitic belt of civilizations. They're always north of it, raiding. One of the great population movements of history, a Japanese airplane lands in Peking, and he speaks with the control tower in English. There's no meaning to it. It was a mutation. It happened. It could have happened 1,000 years later. It could easily never have happened. And for someone like me who wants to see pattern and meaning and order in history, the idea that the most significant events in the history of humanity are just random, and the Indo-European expansion apparently started about 2,500, 3,000 years ago. It could never have started. It could have started 7,000 years ago because, well, I'm trying to remember when cattle were domesticated, but cattle will do it, camels will do it, horses will do it, goats will do it, any kind of edible milk. It could have happened 7,000 years ago. And the difference between what happened and what might have happened is some, ray from space that caused a mutation. And this is hard for me to get my head around. And probably not good news for historians who would like to tell a coherent story based on some theory. And I'm going to shut up. I've taken enough of your time. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, sir.
You used the example of violence. Earlier, you used the example of violent predisposition decreasing by a factor of 20 over an 800-year period.
Decreasing.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you claiming that that is due to some change that occurs with biological evolution, or could that also be some sort of a cultural change?
Well, it may well be. We don't have the critical test. Clark thinks it's genetic change. Certainly that any kind of measure of predisposition to violence is highly heritable. What I'm pointing out is that if half of that change is due to gene change, then under very mild conditions of selection, it could easily happen in 800 years. I'm just trying to use that as an example of how fast evolution ought to happen. Now, whether it is simply culture change or whether it's gene change, well, that's a big question, and that's an important question. But it's also, in the second half of the 20th century, it's kind of a thought crime even to ask it. So we don't talk about it very much. Anyone else? Yeah.
So if instability is a precondition for fast evolutionary change, there's hardly a time in history where